All right, let's jump right into this explainer because today we are going to tear down literally everything you thought you knew about how highly successful creative people operate. We are constantly bombarded with these intense productivity hacks, right? This whole idea that success requires some sort of superhuman robotic discipline. But today we're going to look at the actual data and the historical evidence from top researchers and organizational psychologists to uncover the real secret success strategies of true original thinkers.
So, what do they actually have in common? You might assume they're these flawless, hyper-organized geniuses who never procrastinate or ever doubt themselves. We all tend to picture these perfect individuals who wake up at 4 a.m., know exactly what to do, execute flawlessly, and basically change the world before they even grab lunch. But the data paints a shockingly different picture. When we actually study the habits of history's greatest minds and today's most innovative business leaders, the reality is far more complex, a bit messier, and honestly, it's a whole lot more encouraging for the rest of us.
The reality is that history's greatest minds were often messy, weird, and deeply unconventional. It entirely shatters that perfection myth right out of the gate. Take Benjamin Franklin. The guy would literally sit around completely naked every morning for an hour, taking what he called air baths just to start his day. And on the modern business side, look at the founders of Warby Parker. Their company valued at over $1 billion today, but they were so slow to get off the ground that the day before their massive launch, they didn't even have a functioning website. To the outside world, they looked completely unorganized, but there was a very specific method to their madness. So to understand why this seemingly chaotic approach actually works, we first need to look at how original thinkers fiercely protect their attention from all the noise of the modern world. The master screenwriter Aaron Sorkin pretty much hit the nail on the head when he said, "You call it procrastinating, I call it thinking." What looks like stalling to everyone else is often a vital period of creative incubation. But here's the catch. Before you can incubate those brilliant ideas, you have to create an environment where deep, meaningful thought can actually happen. And this brings us perfectly to Cal Newport's concept of deep work versus shallow work. Look, most knowledge workers waste something like 60% of their day on shallow, busy work. We're talking answering emails, sitting in endless meetings, checking notifications every 5 minutes. But originals, they fiercely protect their deep work time. Deep work is that distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive capabilities to their absolute limit. It creates brand new value. Shallow work, on the other hand, is just logistical stuff. It's easily replicated. Originals know for a fact that you cannot achieve greatness by just scratching the surface of a dozen shallow tasks. Now, there's no single magical recipe for achieving this kind of focus, so you really have to choose a scheduling philosophy that fits your actual reality. You might adopt a monastic approach, completely minimizing all shallow work, kind of like science fiction writer Neil Stephenson. Or maybe a bimodal approach works better, carving out specific days or even weeks just for deep work, like how Bill Gates used to disappear into a remote cabin for his famous Think Weeks. But hey, if you have a standard 9-to-5 job, the rhythmic philosophy of setting aside 1 to 4 hours daily is incredibly effective. The key is just making a deliberate, firm choice about how you are going to protect your time. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that you can't just sit around waiting for inspiration to magically strike. You have to build a strict, bulletproof ritual to trigger deep concentration every single time. Our brains thrive on associations. If you sit at a specific desk for a set amount of time, with very strict rules like absolutely no internet, and you have your coffee and materials prepped and ready, your brain instantly recognizes, okay, it's time to work deeply. You literally have to treat your focus like a muscle that needs a dedicated training environment. But hold on a second. Here's where things get super counterintuitive. Organizational psychologist Adam Grant actually discovered that moderate procrastinators are 16% more creative than people who rush to finish everything early. Wait, what? We just talked about strict routines, and now we're praising procrastination? Well, yes, because once an original thinker enters deep work and loads a really complex problem into their mind, stepping away and delaying that final product allows their brain to quietly incubate divergent, nonlinear ideas in the background. The real danger actually lies on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Have you ever heard of a precrastinator? If you're someone who just frantically races to meet a deadline the second it's assigned, you're actually closing off your mind to unexpected leaps and creative incubation. Precrastinators are in such a frenzy of anxiety just to cross an item off their to-do list that they go with their very first, most obvious idea. True originality means you have to get comfortable living in the tension of an unfinished task, just long enough to let a truly unique solution bubble up to the surface.
There is honestly no greater example of this strategic delay than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was up frantically rewriting his biggest speech at 3 a.m. the night before the March on Washington. He was literally still crossing out lines while sitting in the audience, waiting to step up to the podium. By delaying the finalization of his speech, he left his mind so open to new ideas that he actually improvised those 4 world-changing words, "I have a dream," live on stage. They were never in his original script. And, this idea of strategic delay completely shatters the famous first mover advantage in business, too. It is statistically much safer and way more successful to patiently improve on someone else's idea than to rush just to be the first one out the gate. The data totally backs this up. First movers have a staggering 47% failure rate, but those who wait, observe, and improve, their failure rate drops to just 8%. Think about Google waiting years after AltaVista and Yahoo, or Facebook waiting until long after MySpace. You really don't have to be first. You just have to be different, and you have to be better. Now, to successfully balance this intense, deep work with strategic delay, you need some ironclad and maybe slightly quirky habits. Take Beethoven, for example. The guy meticulously counted out exactly 60 coffee beans for his morning cup. Not 59, not 61, 60. Now, why would a musical genius waste time counting coffee beans? Because by strictly routinizing the mundane details of his morning, he ensured he didn't expend a single ounce of precious cognitive energy on making trivial decisions. By making everyday logistical decisions completely automatic, these creative titans freed up all their cognitive bandwidth for pure, unadulterated genius. Tchaikovsky took an exact 2-hour walk every single day and firmly believed bad luck would strike if he was even a minute short. Author Patricia Highsmith ate the exact same plate of bacon and eggs for almost every meal. Director Ingmar Bergman ate whipped sour milk for lunch daily. Now, the lesson here isn't to copy their weird diets, right? It's to automate your life so your brain can entirely focus on your art. And here's a really surprising fact. A ton of these historical geniuses never even quit their day jobs. It proves that a busy, structured life often provides the exact discipline needed to fuel creative momentum. T.S. Eliot worked at a bank. William Carlos Williams was literally a pediatrician writing poetry on his prescription pads. Franz Kafka worked in an insurance office. Having limited time intensely focuses the mind. The self-discipline it takes to show up for a regular 9-to-5 job often seeps directly back into the creative process, forcing you to use those deep work hours incredibly effectively. So, to make all of this actually sustainable, Cal Newport highly recommends an end-of-day shutdown ritual to completely disconnect from work. This rests your brain and massively improves the quality of your focus for the next day. You simply cannot be in deep work mode indefinitely. You'll burn out. Taking just 10 minutes to check for urgent items, plan out unfinished tasks, and review tomorrow's schedule gives your brain the psychological permission it needs to fully power down. Originality absolutely requires rest. But hey, what happens when the work gets really hard and that inevitable imposter syndrome creeps in? Original thinkers survive by rejecting paralyzing self-doubt, and instead, they weaponize idea doubt to refine their work. Self-doubt makes you freeze. It whispers, "I'm crap, I can't do this." Idea doubt, on the other hand, is energizing. It tells you, okay, the first draft is crap, and I just need to make it better. Originals feel the exact same fear and doubt as everyone else. They just reframe it as a completely necessary step in the creative process. Think about that famous web browser study. It perfectly captures this original mindset. Just like people who actively seek out a better web browser instead of blindly accepting the default, originals are constantly questioning the status quo. This fascinating study showed that employees who actually took the time to download Firefox or Chrome significantly outperformed those who just used the pre-installed Internet Explorer or Safari. It's obviously not about the software itself. It's about being the type of person who doubts the default option handed to them and actively looks for a better way to do things. Yet despite all this, an astonishing 85% of people stay completely silent about their most important ideas at work because they are absolutely terrified of looking stupid. We all assume that if we suggest a weird or bad idea, we're going to be judged for it forever. But originals know that failing to try is a far worse fate than trying and failing. In the long run, our biggest regrets are almost always our inactions, the chances we simply didn't take. Because the ultimate secret strategy of true original thinkers is just sheer volume. They embrace failure like an old friend and generate massive amounts of bad ideas just to finally strike gold. We always celebrate Thomas Edison for the light bulb, but we conveniently forget that he also invented a creepy talking doll that literally terrified children. Bach,
Beethoven, Mozart, they wrote hundreds and hundreds of compositions just to get the handful of absolute masterpieces we know today. The more output you churn out, the more variety you get, and the much higher your chances are of stumbling onto true originality.
So the big, crucial takeaway from this explainer is that originality, it isn't magic. It's a messy, imperfect process of fierce focus, strategic procrastination, and just sheer volume. It is all about doubting the default and pushing past that deeply human fear of looking foolish. Which leaves us with one final exciting challenge for you. If the greatest minds in history had to generate hundreds of terrible ideas just to find their genius, what bad idea will you generate today? Embrace the mess and get to work.